Great. So I believe we have reached the noon hour. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us at Opera San Antonio with our live interview series, Beyond the Production. It's a chance for our artists and designers to step off the stage and come to you with stories about their lives and their art. And today I am thrilled to, of course, be here with my constant partner in crime, Francesco Milioto, our Opera San
Hi,
Antonio
Loren.
music director. Hi, Francesco, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very good, thank you. And our super awesome special guest today is a wonderful friend and colleague of mine, Ryan McKinny. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Loren. Hi, Francesco. Thanks so much
Hey.
for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We're thrilled that you could join us, Ryan. This is really a special treat for not only the two of us, but our whole community here in San Antonio as well. So a little bit of backstory just for everybody who's in our audience today. Ryan and I actually met a while ago, shall we say, when we were both in our up and coming younger days. He was in the Houston Grand Opera Young Artist Program, and it was actually very early on in my operatic career as well. I had just joined the Houston Grand Opera directing staff. So we've known each other for quite a while, and actually just recently we're reunited at Washington National Opera, where I had directed a production of Don Giovanni, which Ryan just starred in. So yay, nice to see you again since then, Ryan.
Yeah, nice to see you again. There was a little distance between those two gigs, which I hope it won't be that long before the next time.
I hope not too, and we'll talk about that distance here in a second, because both of us have been on quite a journey since we first met. For everybody who's watching today, I thought it would be fun to know a little bit about where Ryan is right now, because we had an adventuresome search to find the perfect location. So Ryan, why don't you talk a little bit? I think that's fun for people to know that this doesn't just magically happen.
So I live in Houston, Texas, but we decided to retreat to, we have this cabin in North Carolina that we used to live at, and we kept when we moved to Houston. And it's in the middle of nowhere. It was quite an adventure getting there. You know, we drove like straight through. We didn't want to stay at a hotel. We wore masks in the, gas station and stuff like that. But anyway, so we're here in North Carolina, and this cabin that we have is not very accessible in terms of technology. So we have satellite internet, which is very poor, and we don't have great cell service. So Loren and Francesco and I sort of ran around the county trying to find a good spot. And we actually settled on, this is not my cabin behind me. This is, I'm in the town of Old Fort, North Carolina, where they have a little like historical area that has these old wooden cabins from like 200 years ago or something. And there's no one around. So hopefully this works out. Seems like the connection is good so far. And
and we'll get to hear some birds tweeting, and we'll get to maybe hear some cars.
There may be a car that goes by. You never know.
It's a very organic interview today.
Yes.
So Ryan, a quick shout out. We've got Alan Savada, who's been a constant supporter of ours. He says hello. And also Sammy, I see you on as well, saying hello. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone.
Hi. Nice to see you all.
Hi.
So Ryan,
great. So,
first question would be, as many of us do, we travel a lot. And so with our careers, we spend a lot of time away from home, and you've decided to homeschool your children. And of course, this is a situation that a lot of families, and not just artists or anyone, that a lot of people around the world are finding themselves in, where they need to homeschool and stay with their families, obviously a lot more. Are there any tips? Can you speak a little bit about that? And do you have any tips for people that are new to the homeschool?
So we homeschooled for a long time. I have a daughter, Emma, who's 14, and a son, Lewis, who's 10. And we homeschooled up until this beginning of this school year. Emma really wanted to go to regular school. She picked a tricky time to do that. And so we have a lot of experience homeschooling. I have to say, a lot of people have asked me about this. What people are doing now is not really homeschooling. I mean that with all kindness. Like, it's the situation people are being are in, and what they're being asked to do is not really fair. You know, homeschooling for us was like a couple of hours of schoolwork in the morning, and then we would go to museums and we would go see friends, and we had, you know, co-op groups, and we went to the park. So the idea that you're supposed to be able to educate your kids while just being stuck inside all day long, or having them be in school and doing these distance learning classes, I mean, it's an impossible situation. So I hope everyone gives themselves a little bit of a break. Also, one thing we learned over the years is that kids tend to not learn linearly. Like in school, the curriculum is set up so that you kind of have to make all the kids learn at the same rate, but actually humans aren't really like that. So one nice part about that is if they have a few months now of slow, you know, learning, that's real easy to make up later. It's not a thing where you like bank this knowledge and then you worry that you're losing it and it doesn't, you know. So I think my biggest piece of advice is give yourself a break and cut yourself some slack, and it's going to be okay.
Fabulous.
Yeah, you know, that's a really good point, Ryan. I hadn't considered it from the perspective of how much more you can do when you're not within social distancing mandates. I mean, that really puts an extraordinary stress and pressure on the whole family to be able to motivate and activate throughout a day within the confines of your home, no matter how much content there may be online.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a misconception about homeschooling in general that you're actually at home all the time. We did it so that we could travel together. So we were always in a new city, and we took advantage of, you know, we rode bikes in Amsterdam and went to museums, and we, you know, like went hiking in Korea, and we, you know, did all kinds of stuff, most of which was not inside. So, you know, I think
great point.
A lot of people just don't really know what homeschooling normally looks like. So it's, they're finding themselves like, oh my God, how would you ever do this? The answer is you wouldn't ever do it this way.
Right.
Totally fair. In fact, Virginia, who's been with us for many of these interviews, is saying hello, and also that she agrees. So I think what you're saying, Ryan, is speaking to people. And Laura says hello as well. So let's talk a little bit, Ryan, about how you even came to that stage with your family, because part of that I think is unique to the career path that you've had. So we talked at the very beginning of the interview about getting your start at HGO, but where did that then take you from there? Sort of, if you could give us a bulleted rundown of how you got to be the amazing person you are now.
Well, I think we were talking about, you and I worked on Marriage of Figaro at Houston Grand Opera. That was the fall of the season I started there. And so I had just started. And Emma was born the night before I was supposed to do my first performance as Figaro.
Oh my gosh, I remember Ryan, I had forgotten that completely. Oh my goodness, yes.
So I was in two shows at the same time. I was in Boris Godunov, which was my official debut with HGO, and then I was in Marriage of Figaro, which was like a week later open. And the final performances, or maybe like the second or third performances of Boris, Tanya, my wife, was like in labor or early stages of labor, and she was like in my dressing room, and they were all, you know, all of the backstage people were on headsets saying, you know, Ryan's wife is in labor, like make sure you know, keep him informed. And then Emma was born the night before I was supposed to do the Figaro, and then the Orrin Gratis was the main stage Figaro. I was the like student matinee person, and he stepped in thankfully so I could rest and hang out with my
I remember that
daughter.
now. I remember going into those last minute rehearsals with Orrin, and I had completely blocked that out as to why. I feel much more connected to you and Emma now.
So that really started, you know, this kind of life that we've been doing together. I started then, and I was in the studio for 2.5 seasons, and then we basically, right after I was done with the studio, my wife and I and Emma started traveling together. I was lucky enough to get a few small jobs in, like, I think LA Opera was one of my first ones, and then Houston had me back a couple times. And then I got a few jobs in Germany. Another year after that, Lewis was born, maybe 2 years after that. We all moved to Germany. We moved to Leipzig first,
Wow.
then Berlin for a while. And I was Fest at Deutsche Oper Berlin for a season. And I was still doing mostly smaller roles, but then I started to do some bigger things at that point. Another year or two after that, I made my Met debut. I came back to do a bunch of stuff at Houston Grand Opera. And we just kind of went from there. It was hard in the beginning. Financially, it was really tricky because we were on one income, and, you all might not know, but, a singer's income, especially in the beginning, is quite small. It can, make a good living if you become, a full-time working singer at big houses, but in the beginning, it's really hard. So we kind of scrimped and saved so that we could travel together, and housing is expensive, and, all of the things you'd expect were hard, but it was really worth it, because I know a lot of singers who travel by themselves and have families they leave at home, and I've done some of that, and it's very hard on your family and on you as a singer. And so I was really grateful to get to do that. And we did that for, 12 years or something.
Wow.
Homeschooled Emma all the way through 7th grade and Lewis all the way through 5th. So yeah, it's been quite an adventure, and it continues.
Oh, I'm sure.
Incredible.
Yeah. So Ryan, how the world is revolving in new ways that I think are completely unpredictable. And it's so interesting for all of us to have been on a path, period, is maybe what my statement should be, and then have the current crisis really throw us in a new direction.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious to know how it impacted you when the gig cancellation started, where you were, and then the choices that you made pretty early on within this period, I think, to send yourself in a new direction. Yes? Yeah.
So we were in the middle of the Don Giovanni run at the Kennedy Center, which you, Loren, directed. I think we had done 4 performances and we had 3 left. I had been following the story pretty closely, paying attention to what was happening in Italy, and then some other parts of Europe. The opera company started to shut down, and I've been really trying to learn a lot about the science of what was going on. So I think I was aware of the problem a little bit earlier than a lot of people. So I had been thinking about it. I can't say I was surprised once we got the call that it was canceled. The final performance felt like it was going to be the last one by the time we were there performing. And my first thought was, if this is going to happen this way, it's going to be a while before we can have opera again.
Wow, smart.
I just thought, and my first thought was about all of my colleagues who are artists, especially those who are on a per performance fee contract. For those of you who don't really know about that, we as singers, if you're an independent contractor and if you don't sing, you don't get paid most of the time.
Right.
And so we had a little savings. That's still just like everyone else. There's a timeline to that, so we'll see how that goes.
Right,
but
yeah.
For a lot of people, they were just immediately in trouble. And so I thought, well, I want to keep performing because that's just kind of who I am. And I would like to help in some way. So with Lenny's studio, who had been working with me for a few years, we were coming up with different ideas of how to do that. And a lot of people have been doing similar things, just trying to make some kind of content to keep things going. And I came up with this phrase, keep the music going. And that sort of took off, and we started keepthemusicgoing.com. And in the initial stages, I had thought we would do a lot of live streaming, but it turns out it's very difficult to do that consistently and technically well. And also for me, I found it a little bit limiting in terms of my creativity of what I could bring to, online content. So I started doing some videos that were pre-recorded. Also, I don't have a pianist in my home. That's for a lot of singers. If you're a pianist or you're an instrumentalist of a certain kind, or you're a singer who has like a spouse who's a pianist, which is a very common thing, you can do a live stream from your living room. And for me, that wasn't really possible unless I was going to do a cappella. Once it became clear we shouldn't really be in the room with with anybody who was not in our household. So I started thinking of ways around that, and started making videos with where a pianist would record and then I would record myself and I'd edit them together, and then those got to be a little bit more involved, and we did a few duets with people, and I started doing some stagings to them and planning out different scenarios, and some of them are funny and some of them are sweet. And I did speaking of Marriage of Figaro, we did the entire finale of Nozze with the Houston Grand Opera Studio kids, which was really neat. And for every video we put at the end of it, please head to keepthemusicgoing.com to donate to AGMA Relief and Artist Relief Tree, who are two organizations that are helping out artists that are in trouble right now. And there's some other ones out there that are good too. So, and I think the plan is for the time being to keep doing it. It gets trickier the longer we go, because like everybody, I'm trying to see what, my life looks like over the next few months. And
right.
but I'm very interested in what kinds of content we can be making. And not just I think the initial reaction for a lot of people is of a kind of panicked, like, how do we do what we do in this situation? But to me, at least in part, I think it's interesting to think of it like an opportunity to expand what we thought our art form was capable of.
Yes.
And I've thought for a while now that film of some sort is an interesting direction to head in. One of the reasons I came to North Carolina is that my brother has a small production company, and he's lending me some of his equipment. So we're going to try to experiment with some nicer, better shot films. So far it's all been cell phones. If you all can see on my YouTube channel or on keepthemusicgoing.com, the last thing we did was this No One Is Alone with, like, I think in total we had 28 people, and it was all on cell phones. And wow. It's really interesting and fun and good to experiment with. I think in the future, if we expect people to pay for content, like, we'll have to figure out how to make that content high quality, like we're used to having. I don't think it has to be the same thing as what we do on stage, but I definitely think it has to be high quality in its own way. So I'm interested in finding out, A, how we can expand our possibilities, and B, how we can support artists who are in a tough spot right now. And companies too, not just artists.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
Now, in keeping with all of this new line of work that we're talking about now, we were talking earlier before we actually went live that it's different. I mean, you're used to, and all of us are used to, having a schedule and someone else telling us what to do all of the time. And we were talking about how difficult it is to manage your own schedule and come up with what you need to do, and all, the order that all of the blocks need to go in, so that you plan all of that. But, and of course, some days you're busier staging, some days you're not, some days are lighter than others or not. But Loren asked a great question, and we'd like to ask you here, do you think you're busier now than you were before? Are you less busy? I mean, it seems to me like you're more busy than you were before, or that you would be in staging. But can you talk a little bit about self-scheduling and how busy you are now doing all of these things?
I think part of me wants to say, oh, I'm so busy right now, but it could just be that I had a really cushy gig as an opera singer before.
There you go.
That now I'm just busy like a regular human is. But I am much busier now than I was before. A lot of being a singer is preparing your body and your mind to give a performance. You kind of save up this energy and release it all in an evening. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the time you're actually saving your resources. And now really my job has been more of a producer of sorts. I have, at any time, I might have 6 or 7 projects that are at various stages. And so just hunting down people to get them to respond, and editing and shooting my own things and coming up with new ideas. Meanwhile, there's, of course, all of the normal things everyone's going through, like we're applying for loans from the government, and we are, trying to look through our finances and connecting with people and trying to stay sane while we're stuck not having our normal lives. So I've been much busier. It's been very tricky to, as you said, like I'm used to having a rehearsal schedule sent to me. I show up,
Right.
you know, Loren tells me what to do. I tell her, I think this is a better idea or that's a better idea. She says, okay, we could try that.
Mm-hmm.
and then we go from there. And now, you know, I'm definitely feeling like, oh, I wish I had better organizational skills, because this is, it's tricky. But I'm grateful that, you know, I have to say having so many projects has kept me grounded and sane. I think, you know, in talking to so many of my friends and family, many of whom have, you know, either jobs that they can do from home in some fashion, or people who just don't feel like they're ready to be making anything, other artists who are out of work but just emotionally can't do it right now, or technically can't do it. Just, it can be really so crushing to just be sitting there with nothing to do. And so I've felt very gratified that I have something to do, that, you know, it comes in waves, whether or not, you know, like any good artist, I have lots of self-doubt along the way. And I wonder if what I'm doing is worth it. And then another thing comes up and I think, no, that's actually pretty good. We should try that. So yeah, it's been a lot. It's a lot to juggle, but yeah, I think for now it's worth doing.
Are you a handyman as well around the house? Do you do stuff like that? Because every time I do some kind of project like that, I keep thinking, I wonder how many famous conductors change the wax ring. Like, I wonder, does Daniel Barenboim change the wax ring on his toilets? I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Do
you do handy things at home?
I think you're right about Daniel Barenboim with that one, but I'm just guessing. I don't know. You know, I'm definitely a DIY kind of guy. So but I think
me too.
That's just sort of my personality. You know, I laugh because so many singers are very precious about their bodies and their time and their voices. Sure. And having traveled with my family for all these years and homeschooled, and I have take part in the homeschooling. I was, you know, taught math to Emma for a long time, and I was laugh about, you know, while singers on a show day are resting their voices, I'm teaching algebra, you know, before I go on stage. And so I don't really have, I'm used to kind of digging into whatever things I have to dig into. And I like learning things. So, so that part of it has been okay. But yeah, definitely trying to, you know, get things done around the house, or, you know,
of course,
deal with all the things that I normally don't have to deal with.
So I'm going to jump in to give us a couple of comments from Alan. First, he says, please don't remember DC that way. We love you, which is extraordinary, Alan.
I love DC. I love Alan. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, Alan, you're really extraordinary. And both of us, I think, had a phenomenal experience recently in DC. And I know 100%. We're both eager to go back for more. Yeah. And he also commented and said, so many people are doing so much and we are all grateful, which is wonderful to hear. It's great to know that the efforts of people like you, or even in this small way at Opera San Antonio, are starting to resonate and support with folks. And I want to dig into that just a little bit, Ryan.
Yeah.
Because what I feel in my new position as the general and artistic director is that the future here is really unknown, but that the doors of change are opening, which is to say that we're finding what that future can be, I think, in new ways. So it used to be, I guess that in a sort of bulleted sense, you know, a general director or a company would approach a singer and we would offer you a role and you would accept and we would do a production of that. I mean, that's sort of the basic. But now I see companies inventing digital media content. I see interviews, I see at-home concerts, but it's not just company driven, it's artist driven as well, looking at you and Keep the Music Going in particular. So I'm curious, do you see a vocabulary here evolving where we're in this art form called opera, which is supposedly all about communication, and yet we're going to find new ways to communicate with each other as an industry between these different kinds of groups?
Yeah, I think, you know, we have often, as a art form and as people in this business, have thought of online and any kind of video or film content as marketing primarily. And I think that that now is changing to actually see it as its own art in some ways, you know, at whatever level that is. And I think that people, you know, many companies and directors were already trying to push the envelope in terms of what are the different ways we can communicate with this art form. And so I think that continues. It's just, it has to be much faster now. We have to continue to innovate and think of new things. And I, you know, there was some, I was involved in some debate online a few, like maybe a month ago about, you know, there's some people that were saying, you know, this is a good time to just stop making things for a while and kind of reflect and it'll come back. And I hear that and I don't, I think that's a valid viewpoint, but from my perspective, I think the more the better, because we need to, you know, I may think that, for instance, I've said recently that I think maybe live streaming isn't going to be the way forward or whatever, but, you know, even if I'm not doing live streaming, maybe somebody else comes up with a way to do it that's brilliant. And so I don't want to tell anybody not to do what they think could work, because right now we need all hands on deck to come up with the amazing, you know, thing that's going to help us move forward. You know, things like this interview mixed, you know, live interview mixed with music, I think is amazing. Or things that if they are pre-recorded are done in some clever way, or once we're able to get the real technology in place because we have, you know, we can get more people together, live streaming of some other kind of thing. I just think, you know, it's okay if some of this stuff isn't perfect. I don't think there's anything wrong with too much content and some of it's not good. You know, I think we need to keep thinking outside of the box, and we shouldn't assume that we know what's going to happen or what's going to work. And the great thing about that is whenever we do go back to normal, we'll have this other thing or these other things available to us to integrate into what we already had. I don't think that live performance is going to die. I think it's a human instinct. I mean, people have been singing around campfires since, you know, ancient times. That's going to come back. Live singing is going to come back. But in the meantime, there are lots of other interesting things we can do. And I think we shouldn't think small. We should really see, you know, how far we can go. And then, you know, maybe, I mean, we've talked about for years now that opera in a lot of ways was struggling because there's a kind of tension between the traditional world of opera and kind of the modern world of entertainment. And this moment is a moment for us to figure out how to bridge that gap, I think. We can't have live performances right now. We can't get in a room together and sing for each other like we would love to do. But we have all these artists, all these administrators with humongous amounts of talent and creativity just ready to try new things. And I think the future is bright in that regard. I know everybody's scared, and I'm scared for the world, but I don't think our art form is going anywhere. And I think we're going to see some amazing stuff made in this time period that will help us move forward.
I agree. It feels like an incubator period. You know, we're going to try a lot of things, and there's going to be a lot of growth out the other side of this. Alan is suggesting checking out a superb group on Facebook called Classically Quarantined. I just saw that for the first time the other day. That's a great suggestion, Alan.
Awesome. I'll check that out.
Yeah, Linda is saying resilience is key, which I think resilience is a great word. And Virginia is saying, amen, it can't die. We need it so much. You know, I've heard that what I call the D word, Ryan, that die word being thrown around for many years now, actually, before COVID was even a blip on anybody's radar. And if anything, this era is certainly game changing, but I don't think we're going to die. I think we're going to evolve. And I think evolution is a priority. And Abby Powell, hi from Houston. Hey, Abby. She's saying, amen, bridge the gap, which I totally
Abby was in
agree
the,
with.
For all of you that have watched the things I've made, she was in the No One Is Alone video I just put out last week.
Yes, stunning and gorgeous. So I want to go back to that for a second, Ryan, and talk just a little bit more about Keep the Music Going. A, because I know you've done some extraordinary collaborations. B, some of those collaborations have included folks that are going to be familiar to our San Antonio audience, like Dot Watkins. How are you going about, and I'm sure it's a combination of people approaching you and you approaching people, how are you going about finding opportunities and exploring the different kinds of content that you can put together?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. My guiding principle has kind of been try to be authentic to who I am. I'm not a company, and I'm not trying to make money or get clicks. I want to look back at whatever I did in this time and feel proud of it and feel like it shows who I am. So I've kind of, these things have sort of organically happened, you know. So for example, this one video that a lot of people have seen now, which is me and Jamie Barton doing this Rheingold scene. I like Jamie, we're friends, and I wrote her and said, hey, do you want to do maybe some Rheingold or something together? And she was like, okay, sure, let's do it. And we had Kathy Kelly play us a track. I sent it to Jamie. I was like, you know, if you want to just sing it, we can just do a concert version, that's fine. If you want to do something else, go for it. Let's see what happens. And she sent me back this, you know, video, which is hilarious in the beginning, of her brushing her teeth while she's telling, you know, Wotan to wake up. And I kind of ran with it and then shot this whole other scene and edited it together, and it turned out into a thing. So it came together really organically. We didn't pre-plan it. You know, some other things like Amanda Majeski and I were talking about what we should do together, and she is an excellent dancer and I'm not an excellent dancer. And I was like, well, it'd be funny if we did a thing where, you know, you taught me how to dance. And that turned into what I thought was a pretty funny video. And then Melody Moore and I were talking about, you know, we were just talking about grief in general. And when my dad passed away, her and I were doing Flying Dutchman in Glimmerglass. And, you know, we were just talking about, we wanted to do something together just to make something. And, you know, we were talking about different music we like, and just the idea that people right now, how hard it is that we have to mourn while isolated. And that goes for people whose loved ones are dying of COVID, but also just anybody who has died at any point. Just grief is so isolating already, and that, you know, it doesn't help take the grief away to be with other people, but it does add a comfort to that grief, I think. And so our goal with this, you know, No One Is Alone, is to just try to embrace that and say, you know, grief is a universal thing. And even though all of us are making these videos by ourselves in our living room, we're doing it together, and we can share that with these people that are feeling isolated and hopefully provide some comfort. So for those of you that haven't seen, it's very simple. It's just each singer is holding a photo of somebody or someone who they miss, who's passed away. And it starts out with one singer, Brittany Coleman, who's this amazing Broadway singer, just by herself. And then we add Melody in there with her, and they sing for a while. And then we have a quartet. And then we have another 16 singers that join. Then we have some people who aren't singers just holding their photos. And it turns into this big group by the end. And it just, the idea kind of came organically. It wasn't, it was just to express something that Melody and I were feeling. And I think moving forward, that makes a lot of sense to just keep going that way. And not just for me, but for other artists who are wanting to make things. And I think this goes for companies too, to try to, I mean, this is true with opera, right? Like, when we can talk about our Don Giovanni that we did in DC, but that letting the idea for the art be connected to who we are and what we're all going through, and be meaningful to our audience in a way that isn't just here's the music I can make, here's the sounds I can make, and kind of presenting it, but actually connecting with each other.
Right. Alan is mentioning that he's on the board of a group called In Series, and the director there has just announced that they're one of the first companies on earth to go totally virtual for next season. Cool. So Alan, I'm going to be checking them out. I also know that, companies across the board are figuring out how to go digital or virtual for this year, like Opera Philadelphia and Des Moines both announced virtual seasons. I'm going to be curious as these things evolve to see how much of that platform is archival material versus maybe some of the new kind of material like you're talking about doing. The Rheingold video that you mentioned that you put together with Jamie, which is getting a nod to being really poignant and super, is a really interesting way to explore scene work with an art form that typically requires that we be in the same space and touching and living and breathing together. And this might open up a whole new world for us.
Yeah, I think that obviously, like, the sticking point has always been, well, we need voices to be live. And since we can't do that now, there's a lot of different things we can do. I hope that companies decide to produce new content and not just show archival videos. I think that archival videos are great and I enjoy them, but they're kind of specific to the stage medium. So you're kind of watching a facsimile of something. And that is nice if you can't get to that thing. And I don't think those will go away. But I do think if we know that we're going to be on a screen in someone's house, like we know that is the way that we're going to communicate with people. Let's think of the different ways that screen can give them an interesting experience. And maybe that's something along the lines of something you'd watch on Netflix, some kind of, or, like music video type of things I think are interesting, which is, I guess, sort of what I've been doing. A lot of them would have that feeling where there's like an arc and there's a story, but it's still like within the confines of a musical piece. I think art songs are going to have a big moment. I think one thing that I'm sure a lot of companies are trying to figure out is like, how do you have an orchestra do this? And that's going to be really tricky. It is possible. If those of you that saw the Met gala, they put together that Mascagni piece with a bunch of players, and it turned out really well. That's very labor intensive. I can tell you from having edited a bunch of people together, it's quite labor intensive. And it's labor intensive to create for all of those people. So I think that's a possibility, but probably not going to be the thing that we do all the time. Hopefully we can get a chamber group together in a actual physical space to record. I've thought about
that's going to be a big change when we can actually just get even small groups of people in a space together and feel healthy and safe. Is different than everybody in their individual homes.
I also think there could be interesting ways to integrate orchestras with video content in a way that we haven't done before. By the nature, by having them, normally if you're watching an archival video, you see them in the pit because they have to be in the pit because there's an audience. But if they don't have to be in the theater, maybe you have a scene that happens, in a park and they're all in chairs in the park playing. Or maybe there's, a cafe, and instead of people drinking coffee at the tables, there's, a string section. I think there's a lot of different ways to get at it that involve those people that aren't necessarily just putting them in a pit and recording them, which we know it'll be a while before we can officially do that. But I think chamber music in general is going to have more of a moment because it's, just going to be more accessible sooner. Particularly art song stuff. I'm working on several of these things that really work well in this medium. We have stuff. I'm in this beautiful nature right now, and we're working on a couple of pieces that, so much of the German art song stuff is about nature and being outside and remembering and being alone. And so there's a lot of possibilities there, I think. So I think there's, let's all keep our thinking caps on.
Of course.
I think that's great. Yeah. Fantastic.
And speaking
so,
of...
we have Virginia popping in to say we can do better. And I think she's right. I think how I interpret your comment, Virginia, is to say we're at the beginning of whatever this brave new world is. And it's going to take minds breaking open to think outside of the box, and it's going to take innovators like Ryan pushing the envelope forward. So we're all in it together. Absolutely. Sorry, I cut you off, Francesco. I think you were going to segue us.
Yes. So speaking of songs and art songs, getting to the live performance of our interview, which a lot of our listeners and watchers are always excited to hear and see. Ryan chose the song by Charles Ives, American composer, called "Songs My Mother Taught Me." And actually, I mean, I've conducted some Ives. Of course, I've listened to a ton of it, and I've played a bunch of songs, but I've never had to play this song. And of course, the lullaby-esque quality of the music, I think, it's gorgeous and beautiful. And then, of course, whenever you have Charles Ives, the polyharmonies and the shifts of chords, they're just simple and slow, but also really impactful and important to the text. And it just sometimes throws you in a strange into a new strange spot. But I love playing this for you, and it was a fun project to do, and I'm glad that the tracks worked out. And so one of the things that our listeners really love to know is why you chose this song. So if you could talk to us a little bit about that and then set us up to sing it, that would be really wonderful for us.
Yeah, sure. So I love this song. I've been singing this song for quite a while. It's not really well known. As you say, there is some of that polyharmony kind of thing in it, but it's mostly just really beautiful tune. And I love the kind of generational aspect of it. You know, my parents sang to me when I was little, like many of our parents have, and I sung to my kids almost every day for their lives. And I think passing music along that way is a really beautiful thing. And I think this song really gets at the heart of that. So let me see if I can make my technology work here for a second.
Yeah, go ahead and set up your technology. Alan Savada is signing off with us for this afternoon. We love having you here, Alan. Thank you so much. He's headed out to an in-series Zoom session, which is great. While Ryan's getting set up, I wonder, Francesco, if you could talk a little bit about how we do this, because this recording of the track we've done for artists like Ryan, we're also doing the recording of the piano track, but with video for some of our audience members who are enjoying the From Our Homes to Yours ARIA video series. Not as easy as it looks, right?
No, it's not as easy as it looks, but it's just a new kind of collaborating. So, you know, it's also still interesting, and there's input coming from both sides. So what, you know, after we've chosen what we're going to do, what I like to do, because I think it's just a little bit quicker, is that I will call the singer and ask if it seems to be like a difficult song or a difficult aria or something that has certain spots. I'll ask a couple of questions. But I think the first thing that happens is that I play just a quick voice memo track, and I'll send it over, and then the singer will listen to it and say, oh, well, yes, this is great, but could you do this part a little bit slower, this part a little quicker? With Renee Barbera, there was, could you play this a little bit softer? So whatever they would like, they'll sort of speak to me back or voice memo me back. And then I'll lay down a good clean track of what they've asked me to do. And sometimes I have to adjust that again. So, and then, you know, when you think about it, I mean, it has to be played perfectly, or at least one wants it to be played perfectly. So it's not always like, when I did this Ives song, I didn't tell this to Ryan, but the first time I made that whole track, I made it all the way to the second last bar. And then at the second to last bar, for some reason, my mind skipped one of the repetitions of the B flat sus chord. And I just stopped, and I was like, I made it to the, so, you know, and then I had to go all the way back to so, you know, sometimes it just happens like that. And I'm sure singers that are recording live on the videos and things do the same thing. But
Absolutely.
I just thought it was funny that I made it to the second last bar, and then, so that's sort of the process, a little bit of back and forth. And then I just start with what I think will be a good, clean track, and then make adjustments from there. And it's just like a lot of listening and back and forth collaborating. It's fun, just, you know, a little slower than being in the room with each other, but
I think my stuff is working now whenever y'all are ready.
Great.
Fabulous.
Oh, fantastic. I think that's great. Word collaboration is gorgeous to hear what you're able to share with us today, Ryan.
Okay. Songs my mother taught me in the days long vanished, seldom from her eyelids, were the teardrops banished, were the teardrops banished. Now I teach my children each melodious measure. Often tears are flowing from my memory's treasure. Songs my mother taught me in days long vanished, seldom from her eyelids, were the teardrops banished, were the teardrops
Fabulous.
Ryan, just gorgeous. And I have to say, I actually think hearing the birds in the background while you're
Right?
singing makes that all the more special. Really, really fun to hear that. It makes me grateful to know you, and it definitely makes me sad to not be in rehearsal with you right this moment.
Yeah,
Really
same.
fantastic.
Well, this
Really
is a really
fantastic.
lovely thing you all have going here, and I really appreciate you letting me be a part of it.
Thank
so
you,
much.
Ryan. So I'm going to say, of course, a big thank you to you, and a big thank you, as always, to Francesco for joining me in these efforts, and of course,
And thank you for your wonderful playing, Francesco.
Oh, no worries.
Yes, thank
My
you,
pleasure.
Francesco, for your artistry as well. And of course, thank you to our patrons who are watching now, and those that also choose to join to watch us afterwards as well. Virginia just chimed in to say beautifully done. So congratulations to you both. For those of us who are watching, in addition to saying thank you, I also would be remiss if I didn't use this opportunity to say we as artists and we as a company love being part of this community. And we hope to be here for many, many moons to come. And now more than ever, thanks to the world that we're in, we need your help and your support. So if you have the means, please do donate either to Opera San Antonio or to the Opera San Antonio Artist Relief Fund. It's very easy to donate if you head to our website, operasa.org. In the meantime, we'll look forward to seeing you all next week. Final thank you to Ryan and Francesco. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye, Loren.